Good morning, everybody. This is Noah, one of the educators with Shortcuts. Today, on our classroom session, we're going to be looking at online client information cards, CIC, and custom forms. So this is a basics class. It's actually going to build a little bit on something we learned on the Anywhere class, which is when we were giving staff permission to look at their appointments. So as with previous presentations, we are going to record this session and we will be sharing it with all the people that signed up for it a little bit later today. So let's actually dig into today's presentation. So this will be approximately 30 minutes. We will allow some time for questions at the end. If you're watching this video after the fact and you have a question, you can always reach out to us. You can reach us on our actual emails, education@shortcuts.net, and you can also reach us on social media, on our Facebook page or even our Instagram page. We will get back to you. So of course we are recording this session, so let's take a look at today's topic. So Shortcuts online services, specifically the online client information card, working with custom forms and using custom forms. So if you're a salon, if you're a spa, and let's say for various reasons, your customers have to fill in a form. So this is something that I helped recently with a tattoo parlor that actually uses Shortcuts. So before any customer has any work done, they have to fill out, of course, a liability form, a waiver. So it has questions about the health and things like that of the customer, where they would like the placement of that tattoo. Have they already spoken to their stylist and discuss their options? So things like that. So rather than having a bunch of paper files, which are easy to misplace, easy to lose, you can actually create custom forms for the clients to fill out. Now, if you're a salon, and of course, you have regular customers that come in every few months to get some hair color or some highlights or balayage or toner, whatever it is, and these customers are regular, and your staff has formulas for them. So normally you would of course record their color formulas in Shortcuts, and it is in the client information card, which is something that the front desk could print up, or if the employee had permission, they can look up on the client card, look at their formulas, print them up, and of course code to the color bar and mix up their formulas. But we want to free up the front desk. We don't want staff necessarily going to the computer each time they need to look up these notes or add notes or look up formulas. So you actually have the ability to bring up a client information card using a tablet, or if the staff member has permission, they can bring it up on their own phone. They can look up those formulas, they can add notes if they want to, and they don't have to go to the main computer. So online client information cards now have the ability to also save custom forms. So your staff, not just your receptionist, can have a tablet, can add a new customer, can have the customer then fill in a particular form that they have to do. And then they can review it and save information on that form, and everything synchronizes with Shortcuts. So let's go through that. How do you give permission to the staff to actually access this before you even set up any sort of custom forms? So we need to give the staff access to the client information card. And to do that, you have to give those permissions into your site settings in your online console. So this is where I mentioned that this is related a little bit to the classroom session that we did regarding Anywhere. So Anywhere is where we give your staff permission to look at their appointments. But one of the steps in that is actually giving your staff permission to access the client information card. So if you're already familiar with the online console, and you should be, hopefully, if you're watching this, so you would go to console.shortcutsoftware.com and you would go to site settings. Once you're in site settings, in the middle of the screen, in the middle of your rules, this is where you tell Shortcuts, if I give a staff member permission to access the client information card, when exactly can they do that? So you can have it set to that they can access the client information card anytime. So even if they're at home and they bring up their cell phone, they can search for a customer, search for the card. So you can, of course, imagine you may not necessarily want them to have this access. Instead, you can allow them to only be able to search for client cards during normal business hours. Or you can perhaps give them a half hour to an hour before or after the business hours for your salon or your spa or your barbershop. So you have three sets of options. Once you mark it, then you have to choose, okay, if somebody has permission to access the online client information card, how do I give them permission to actually do that, whether they're using a tablet or using their own phone? So this is where you would go to manage users. So I'm actually going to give you a live demo on how to do this. So again, this is building on the Anywhere classroom that we had the week before. So let's get out of this presentation for a moment and let's actually go to the online console. So in the console, again, when you want to choose when the staff can access the online client information card, you're going to go to site settings. It's this gear icon. And if we scroll down, so this is of course Angel Salon, we'll scroll down and just past the business hours, there's a portion that says client information card access. So if we give the staff permission to access this, when can they do it? Only during business hours? Anytime, so all times, or perhaps just 30 minutes before or after your business hours. So once you set this, then whatever your preferences are set to, and whenever you give staff permission to access the online CIC, it's going to go based on these rules. So if I make my choice, on the top right corner, I'm going to save it. So now I've saved it for Angel Salon. So just because I save these permissions doesn't mean that anybody on staff has access to the online client information card. You want to pick and choose who should be able to access this. Maybe it should only just be your front desk or your receptionist or your manager. So on the right side, you're going to manage users. And once you're in manage users, you can search for any staff member in your salon. And then, of course, somebody has to drive their motorcycle right outside my window during this presentation. Sorry about that. On the left side of the screen, let's say I'm going to give Richard permission to access the online client information card. So I'm going to go to Edit. And as I scroll down, so remember, this is where we build on the rules that we were talking about in the online client information card. So for which site is Richard located? So I'll just pretend he's one of these staff members on the first one. And then in the middle of the screen, again, this goes back to the rules we talked about in Anywhere. For most locations, you give your staff employee and appointment operator permission. This allows them to make appointments for themselves and to look at their appointment book. That's it. They don't see anybody else's. They don't make appointments for anybody else. But if this person is allowed to access the client information card and access any custom forms that you create, this is where you would choose CIC access. So client information card access. So this is particularly important if you have a salon where your staff has to review color formulas, or like I mentioned earlier, if you have customers filling out forms for tanning, for tattoos, for any service where they require a sign off, you want to give them CIC access. Once I press the save button, then Richard is going to get his permissions updated. And the next time he accesses his phone or the tablet at the salon, he'll now have the ability to bring up client information and to have the customer sign up for the forms. So I'll go back to the main screen, site settings. actually the main online console. So we're going to pause there. So that's how you give your staff permission to access custom information or client information cards. So that was our, we'll bring up the slideshow again. There we go. So that was our live demo. So now that you know how to give staff permission to access the online CIC, where do you go when you want to create a custom form? So that is still handled through the online console. Now, not every location that has shortcuts has access to this. This is usually one of the upper tier packages. So if you're running an old version of shortcuts, you haven't really renewed your contract to get any of our new features, this is something you may consider. So to create a custom client information card, a custom form, you're going to go to the console and you're going to the client information button. 9 times out of 10, that's the button you press on the tablet to search for customers. This is if you're an owner. But if you're the community manager, if you're the site manager, you'll want to go to the Forms button on the right side of the screen. And then you're going to create a form. Again, not everybody that has shortcuts or has access to the online console has permission to access this. This is usually something that's only available on our upper tier packages. So if you go to the console and you don't have access to this, it might be time for an upgrade. So with custom forms, there are no templates to work from. You have to create your own forms. And it's very easy to do that. When you create a new form, you'll be asked to give it a name. So is this your sign off for color, for piercing, for tattoos, for tanning, for anything that requires a sign off? You'll give it a name. You can even choose to give it a logo, give it a title, and then start filling in the blanks. Now, a number of this information, particularly the client's contact information, can actually be auto-populated based on the information that you have in the client card. So if you have an existing customer or you have a brand new customer, the first thing you'll actually have this brand new customer do is create a new client entry. So once you have their basic contact information, then you can have them go into their client profile and fill out a form. So let's actually take a look at this. How does this work? So again, we're going to go back to our console, and on the right side, we're going to client information. Now, if you were a multi-site chain and you just needed to add a new customer or have them fill out an existing form, then you would press one of the buttons on the left side. But on the right side, we're going to create a form. So these are the forms I've already started. So I'm going to go to my test form and I'm going to edit this. Otherwise, I would create a new form. But let's edit an existing form. So this is my test form. And I tell Shortcuts, does the customer have to fill out a new form every time they visit? Or is this a one-time deal? So do consider this. Does an employee, does a staff member actually have to just confirm that everything was entered correctly before this card gets saved? Yes or no? So the staff member actually confirms it with their PIN. So then the layout. You choose the actual order and the placement of the questions in the form. On the right side, there are two fields that you can choose from. Shortcuts client fields, that's your very first option, and extra form fields. Extra form fields is actually where you're going to post your questions, such as, have you had an operation in the past few years? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you have, any illnesses that we need to know about? Hypertension, diabetes, etc., etc. So you can actually choose a multiple choice, a number question, or have them go through checkboxes. But let's go to the Shortcuts client fields. So first name, last name, email, cell phone number. So on the right side, if I press any one of these tiles that I have, then Shortcuts is going to add this row into my custom form. So I just added cell phone, but I want cell phone to be moved up a little. I want it to be placed above email, but after last name. So on the right side, there's a little arrow that allows me to change the placement of my cells. So now it says first name, last name, cell phone, email. And remember, this is a form that is pulling information directly from your client card. So when you go to this form for a customer, the top 4 lines will automatically be populated for you. If the customer does not have a cell phone number, Shortcuts will prompt them to enter it in the form. So keep that in mind. Anything under Shortcuts client fields will try to auto-populate already from the existing client card. And then as we go through, we now decide we want to customize this form. So I'll go to extra form fields, and maybe I want to have a heading. What exactly is this form for? So maybe this will be my color consultation form. So I'm going to move that header up. So right at the top, this is going to say color consultation. And maybe I want to include my business logo. So I'll press image logo, and I will upload a logo from my computer. So I think I have a test logo I can use. Here we are. And should it be centered or left or right? I can center it. So right at the top is my business logo, the form color consultation, and then I start creating my own custom form. So one of the things I have is a checkbox list. Is this mandatory? Yes or no? So I can actually tell Shortcuts for any extra form field that I add, number, checkbox, single line text where the customer actually has to type an answer, multi-line text. Does this particular tile have to be filled in by the client before it'll allow me to save it? Yes or no? How many rows should it have? So in this case, I have 2 main lines. Do you use any of the product brands? Redken, Dermalogica. So I currently have 3 columns. On the right side, I can add yet another tile. So Redken, Dermalogica, and maybe L'Oreal. Once I press the green plus button, I've now added a 3rd choice. So I can continue adding as many choices as I want. And this is the multiple choice question. And again, is it mandatory? Yes or no? So little by little, I start filling in this form. Now, does the customer have to sign something, has to agree with my terms and conditions? If so, I can add a terms and conditions block. I can give it a title. I can literally call it the same thing, terms and conditions. And does the customer, is it okay for them to just click a checkbox, or if they're using the tablet, do they have to sign it? So in this case, there is a signature required. And then I could put in my actual terms and conditions. By signing this form, you agree to our terms and conditions. And if you want, you can include the business name, your address, your phone number, things like that. So as you start to build your custom form, on the right side, don't forget to hit save. So you can always circle back to these forms. You don't have to fill in a form in one sitting. So take your time, continue to edit these, and when you're absolutely happy with all of the questions, with the placement of everything, at the very top of the screen, there's a checkbox that says active. Once you press active, then the staff that has permission to access the client information card will now be able to bring in this form and have a customer fill it in. So you can create as many forms as you need for your business. And again, that particular tattoo place I was working with earlier that I was mentioning. So they actually had about 6 or 7 different forms because they did piercings, they did tattoos, they did a few other services, and they needed to make sure they had enough forms to cover all of those various services. And if they need any future forms, they can always create brand new forms. So keep this in mind. This is how you start to create your own custom forms. So once you've created your forms, if you give your staff permission to access the client information card, then from their phone, from their tablet or the business tablet, when you search for a customer, you can search for a customer and then have them fill in the form. So that takes us to the third part of today's lesson. How do you search for a form? How does the customer fill it in? So let's go back to our presentation. So the staff member, the receptionist, whoever it is, will search for a customer on their phone or on the tablet. They will be required to enter their security PIN. That's how Shortcuts verifies they have permission to search for these people and they have permission to access CIC. Once they search for that customer, they'll press the client entry button. And this is what shows, has the customer filled in any forms in the past, yes or no? Or are you going to add a new form? Or are you going to search for a new form? Once you search for that particular form, the customer will then go through those details. They'll click the checkboxes, they'll update their phone number or their email, they'll agree to your terms and conditions, so they'll actually sign off on it, and then press done. At that point, your receptionist, your employee, has to look at the tablet, has to look at the phone, and verify that the customer filled in all of the correct information. So they'll remind them, oh, don't forget to put in a date, or don't forget to answer question number 3, and then put in their security PIN. So that's where it can come in handy that you set certain questions to be mandatory, because Shortcuts will not allow the customer to press the done button without reminding them, oh, don't forget to answer question 3 and 4. Then you can press the done button. And still, the staff member gets a chance to review it, enter their security PIN, and save it or adjust it. So once the customer fills in a form, if the staff has to go back and actually take a look, has the customer filled in a particular form? Do they have to fill in a new form? How do you look for that? So you would, again, go to your online CIC. And when you search for the customer, you press the client history button. So remember, in client history, this is normally where you can put in visit notes, history notes, color formulas, and the information that you have here is something that you can actually search for whenever a customer visits. But in addition to that, you can now search for any forms that they've already filled out. So you can also put in a message like, oh, the client filled out this form last Saturday, and they're visiting the following Saturday to actually have their procedure, their work done. And that actually takes us to the end of today's session. So the first thing you need to do is choose which staff members have access to the online client information card. If you only want a manager and a receptionist to have this access, you can absolutely do that. Or if you want everybody to have access, again, you can do that. Should they have access to this before business hours or only during business hours? You can set those permissions. And then, do you have custom forms that a client has to fill in? So you get to create as many custom forms as you need. And only the people that have permission to access online CIC can bring up those forms. And then once the customer fills in the form, how does the staff review that? How does the staff add notes to that information? So all of this is now stored in the Shortcuts cloud in the online console. So you don't have to worry about looking for a piece of paper, going through a filing cabinet, everything's online. Not only that, with the online CIC with your custom forms, you actually have the ability to use your tablet or use your phone and take a picture of the customer. So if there's a particular tattoo and you were taking pictures of the progress, if there was hair color or a hairstyle and they absolutely loved it and you just want to take a picture of it and save it in their online CIC, you can now do that. So keep those in mind. This can greatly help the business and it's very easy to work with. Now, something that's going to help you if you're using online CIC, make sure to review the classroom session on Anywhere because the permissions for Anywhere and online CIC are very complementary. So let's actually open up the floor for questions. So remember, you can watch all our old webinars. We do have them on our Shortcuts webpage. We also have them on our YouTube page if you search for Shortcuts USA. So let's open up the floor for questions. On the right side of the screen, if you have any questions, there should be a little chat tile, a little question tile. So I'll give everybody a moment. And I'll check the questions on my side. And we'll see if anybody has a question. And I don't think I have any questions. Okay, if you're watching this video after the fact, and if you go to the online console and you do not see permission to access the client information card, or you do not see a button that says create a new form, remember, you may not be on one of our new tiers, or you may not be running a newer version of Shortcuts. So you probably need to be upgraded on your Shortcuts contract. So you can always reach out to our customer success team and find out more information on online CIC and on our custom forms. So go ahead and reach out if you have any questions regarding today's video or other questions. You can reach our education team, that's me included, education@shortcuts.net. You can reach us on social media on our Facebook page, also on Instagram, Shortcuts USA, or our main company page. So our help desk is always here. So let's say you already have online CIC, you have custom forms, but you've never used it. So you can always call the help desk and they can just give you a couple of quick pointers. Okay, start here, fill in these forms, and then save it. So they can absolutely help you with that. So thank you all for attending. We will be sharing a video of this recording with you a little bit later today. Have a great day, and I hope to see you in the next session.